Okay guys, I'm here today with John Danaher, huge honor for me. Guys, today John is gonna kind of explain to us here how is the dynamic pin in Jiu-Jitsu. So the next video we are releasing with him about the half guard passing and dynamic pinning. It's a lot about that, how to pin in Jiu-Jitsu. So can you explain a little more, John?
I'd love to, yeah. There's a subject matter in Jiu-Jitsu which gets very, very little attention. And it's a strange thing because for reasons that I'll soon explain. And that's the idea of pinning people, okay? Normally when we think of pins, you think of other grappling sports like wrestling or judo where a pin can end a match, okay? You get caught in a pin in wrestling, you get held down for a period of time depending on the rules of the event you're in. The match is over. Same in judo. If you get pinned down for depending on the time you're competing, 20 to 30 seconds, the match is over. In Jiu-Jitsu, a pin never ends a match. Okay, you just keep on going. That means we, as Jiu-Jitsu players, have to be able to hold pins for extended periods of time. You might get you might enter into a side pin early on in the match, and you've got to be able to stay away from his legs for the rest of the match. It's important we understand what is the very nature of pinning in Jiu-Jitsu, okay? The first prerequisite of any pin in Jiu-Jitsu is you have to be past your opponent's legs, okay? So if we were in a wrestling match, you just lie down here, Bernardo, this would be a successful pin in a wrestling match. Like so. But this would clearly not be a pin in Jiu-Jitsu because Bernardo still has a hold of my leg. So this would not be a pin in our sport. But this would be a successful pin in wrestling, for example. Okay. In the sport of judo, a pin like this can end a match. Okay, provided I hold it for a certain period of time, for 20 seconds. Okay. In the sport of Jiu-Jitsu, that's a non-scoring pin. Okay, well, I'll come back to that soon and understand the difference between scoring and non-scoring pins in our sport. So we have to start understanding, okay, if the pins of Jiu-Jitsu are fundamentally different from the pins of other sports, what is their nature? Because only by understanding how pins work in the sport of Jiu-Jitsu can we maximize our effectiveness when it's time to actually go out there and start using them. So the first prerequisite, you've got to get past your opponent's legs. If any part of my legs, even a foot, is caught inside my training partner's legs, it's no pin, okay? It's only when the feet are completely free of my opponent's legs that we're counted as past our opponent's guard and in a pin type situation, okay? Understand also that Jiu-Jitsu has pins that don't occur in any other grappling sport. These are the so-called chest to back pins. When most people think of pins, they think of chest to chest situations, okay? So in judo, this would be considered a pin. However, sitting up, this would score nothing in the sport of judo, regardless of whether I'm underneath Bernardo or on top. Okay, but in Jiu-Jitsu, this scores 4 points. Okay, this is actually one of the best of all pins, and we're chest to back rather than chest to chest. So Jiu-Jitsu is very unusual insofar as it permits. If we just turn face down, Bernardo, chest to back pins. Okay, these score 4 points if they satisfy certain prerequisites. But in judo and wrestling, this would score nothing. This would not finish a match under any circumstances. It's not considered a pin. Okay, so Jiu-Jitsu has a very unusual approach to pinning. It permits chest to back pins, unlike any other grappling sport. Pins don't end matches. You just have to keep on fighting your way through them. And also, pins are given different scores. In wrestling, there's just a pin. If you put his shoulders on the floor, it's over. In judo, same thing. If you get past your opponent's legs, they're all the same. They all result in the termination of a match. In Jiu-Jitsu, pins are given different scores according to a rather strange criteria. And that criteria is what potential do they offer in an actual fight situation to strike and submit your opponent. Okay, so certain kinds of pins score very highly, and certain other kinds of pins score a little less, and other kinds of pins don't score at all. So if we look at the sport of Jiu-Jitsu, there are 5 standard pins in the sport of Jiu-Jitsu. Let's have a look at all 5 of them right now. Just lie down, Bernardo. The first family of pins are side pins, and these are any situation where I'm across my opponent's side and forming a T shape relative to my opponent. Okay. The basic idea behind a side pin is that my hips are between my opponent's shoulder line and his hip line. Okay, if my hips are between the shoulder and hip line, and I'm out to a side, chest to chest, any variation from this position we consider a side pin. Okay, it's important for you to understand that side pins do not score in the sport of jiu-jitsu. There's a common misconception about this. People think that side pin scores 3 points. It does not. Okay, the action of getting past your opponent's guard, that scores 3 points, but the side pin itself scores 0. You can understand this very simply by looking at a turtle situation. Bernardo's in a turtle position, and just sitting up, Bernardo, I get a good grip here on my training partner's cross lapel, and as a result, I'm able to pull Bernardo down into a side pin. How many points do I score for that? 0. Okay, I pulled him into a side pin, but at no point did I pass his guard. Always understand that what you get rewarded for is the guard pass, not the side pin. Okay, and you can clearly see this in the case of turtle breakdowns. When you break someone down from a turtle, you didn't pass their guard, and so when you pull them down to side control, you score nothing, 0 points. So side pins are an important form of pin in jiu-jitsu, but they score nothing. A second form of pin in jiu-jitsu are the so-called north-south pins. North-south pins are where my hips go above my opponent's shoulder line. Okay, so a side pin is where between the hip line and the shoulder line, and north-south pin is where my hips go above the shoulder line. I can be directly north-south, right on the center line, or I can be obliquely north-south. It doesn't matter. They're all north-south pins so long as my hips are above the shoulder line. These two score 0 in the sport of jiu-jitsu. You're not rewarded for them. Okay, no points come out of those. So the two non-scoring pins in jiu-jitsu are side pins and north-south pins. Okay. Now, that's where we get into the 3 scoring pins of jiu-jitsu. Okay, the first of the scoring pins is the knee on belly. Okay, this is a strange, you wouldn't even normally think of this as a pin because there's no chest-to-chest contact. It's a floating pin where from a given situation, we pop up and we place our knee here on our training partner's stomach, and my second knee comes off the floor. The criteria for score is that one knee is off the mat, one knee is on my training partner's stomach. There's no criteria for upper body positioning here. My hands can be anywhere they want. So long as I have the lower body position, you score the points. If my second knee is on the floor, no score. Okay, we need this configuration here. One knee off the mat, one knee on like so. Okay, and this scores 2 points in the sport of jiu-jitsu. Okay, the idea behind the scoring is that we're trying to assess how much potential is there for striking damage from these positions. You can argue back and forth about whether the traditional rule structure and point structure of jiu-jitsu is an accurate reflection of how much potential damage there are from these pins. I personally disagree with the original ideas of jiu-jitsu that side pins don't have value for striking. I think the history of mixed martial arts has shown pretty clearly that side and north-south are actually very strong striking positions. You can use knees from north-south, you can use elbows, short-range hammer blows from side control and do quite a bit of damage from side control on north-south. But that's a separate issue. I'm not arguing about that now. We're just talking about historically, it was generally considered the prerequisites for damage are distance. Okay, given that most people tend to strike mostly with fists and elbows, you need distance between myself and my opponent. When we're here chest to chest, it's hard for me to generate distance and to generate any kind of leverage into my striking with hands and elbows. Okay, they seem to have overlooked the possibility of knee strikes from side control. But as I said, that's a separate issue. Now, the third scoring position goes when we transfer from side positions into the mounted position. The mounted position scores 4 points. It's the highest scoring method in the sport of jiu-jitsu. If I make a successful transfer from a side pin across into a mounted pin, then from here they've just achieved 4 points, the biggest score in the sport. Okay. Conversely, if I transfer from a given pin into a rear mounted position, okay, we get in behind an opponent, and then from here I successfully get 2 hooks in on my training partner. This too scores 4 points in the sport of jiu-jitsu. Okay, so we're at an interesting situation here in Bernardo where the basis of the score for pins in jiu-jitsu is based upon their applicability or their perceived applicability in street fighting. Okay.
Yep.
How much damage can I do with fists and submissions from these positions? So side control scores 0, north south scores 0, knee on belly scores 2, probably because it's not quite as stable as the others. Mount scores 4, the maximum, because it's tremendous punching potential,
Yep.
and the back scores 4, the maximum, because it's tremendous strangulation potential. Now, with that in mind, that's the reasoning behind the 5 fundamental pins of jiu-jitsu. You have to understand that, again, going back to this idea that pinning in jiu-jitsu is substantially different from other grappling arts. The real point scoring in jiu-jitsu comes from transitions from one pin to another. Okay, typically from the non-scoring pins like north-south or side control into the big scoring pins like the mounted position and the rear mounted position. Now it's at this point that I want to start asking you and you some interesting questions, and I want you guys to think about this for a second. I'm going to run some questions at you, and I'm curious what your answers are, and if they come in line with my own. I'm going to ask you a first question. What do you think is the most physically tiring method of scoring points in jiu-jitsu? What's the most physically exhausting method of scoring points in jiu-jitsu? What's the one that takes the most effort to get your points on the board?
Sweep and guard pressing.
Interesting. I'm going to go with takedowns. Okay.
Takedowns.
If you've got a guy in front of you who's got good takedown skills, he's not easy, he's done years of judo and wrestling, you've got to take him down. It's hard work. Okay. I'm going to go with sweeping people. If you've got a talented guy, a world champion on top of you, to sweep guys at world championship level, Bernardo, I didn't need to tell you this, it's hard work.
Yep.
You get a guy who can do backflips over your
Yep.
hook sweep, and then it's hard to sweep at world championship level. It's hard work. And I'm going to go with guard passing. Okay, you got a talented guard player on bottom. Okay, who's flexible, fast, has great framing. It is hard work to pass their guard. You can spend 8, 9, 10 minutes battling away and maybe not even passing the entire duration of a match. And at the end of it, you're like, oh my God, I put in so much work to score those points. Okay, so I'm going to say the 3 hardest ways in terms of physical energy expenditure to score points in the sport of jiu-jitsu. Takedowns, that's probably my vote for number 1. I'll go with guard passing at number 2 and sweeping from guard at number 3. Now, how many points did they score? Takedowns?
Takedown.
2.
Guard passing 3. Sweep. Okay, 7.
2. It's 2 points for
Yeah. So
if you get a successful guard pass, it's 3 points. If you successfully sweep someone, it's 2 points.
yeah, and
If
a
you take
takedown.
someone down,
Yeah,
2
7
points.
total.
Yeah. So you see, those are pretty low numbers. Now, I'm going to ask you a different question. What do you think are physically the least tiring ways to score points in jiu-jitsu?
That's true. Take the back, mount, knee on belly.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that too. The easiest way in terms of physical expenditure is to slide your knee across someone's stomach and get mounted. That takes almost no effort.
Yep.
If your opponent turns his back on you and you slide 2 hooks in, that takes minimal effort.
Yep.
Okay. And how many points did that score?
A lot. 4.
4. Okay. That's a crazy situation, don't you think? The toughest way to score points in jiu-jitsu is a takedown. You got to work like a dog on a world champion to put him down. You get 2 measly points. But if you get that same world champion and you're across his side and you slide your knee across his stomach, it's relatively low volume of work, you get 4 points. Now that's crazy, right? Because most grappling sports, the more work that gets done, the more you get rewarded. For example, in wrestling, if you hit a simple tripping takedown, you might score 2 points. If you pick him up off the floor and take him directly from his feet to his back, you might get 4 points. If you hit a high amplitude throw, where he goes directly from his feet to his back and his hips go over his head, you get 5 points. So the more physical effort you put into the move, the more you get rewarded. So too in judo, a small throw, knock him down, you get a small score. But if you throw with power and amplitude and smash him into the mat, you get the maximum score and the match is over. So it's an odd thing that in most grappling sports, the more physical work you get done, the more power you impart to the move, the more you get rewarded. And in jiu-jitsu, it seems to be the exact opposite. The hardest things to do get you the least reward, and the easiest things to do get you the most reward. Now, what does this mean for you as a grappler out there learning to hone your craft? There's a very important lesson here. If you want to score the big, easy points in jiu-jitsu, you got to get good at dynamic pinning. You got to be able to go from a non-scoring pin to a scoring pin. And if you want to rack up big scores on your opponents at minimal cost to you in terms of energy expenditure, that's the route you want to be going, okay? Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't study your takedowns, don't study your guard. These things are all critically important. And you're not going to be able to get into the position to get these big scores unless you're also good at those things. But what I am saying to you is this: don't underestimate the value of these moves, because these give you a great path to big points at relatively low cost, okay? So if you want to get a lot for a little in the sport of jiu-jitsu, this is the route you want to be taking, dynamic pinning. Now I've got to ask a question here. I have to answer a question here, and that's, okay, what do you mean when you talk about dynamic pinning? What is that? Okay, I've heard about mounted position, rear mount, these things make sense. What do you mean when we talk about dynamic pinning? My point is that in jiu-jitsu, we don't really get rewarded for holding someone down and immobilizing them, okay? In the sport of judo, you just lie down, Bernardo. The idea is I want to immobilize someone for a period of time. I believe in the current rules of judo, it's 20 seconds. It used to be 30 seconds back in the day, but nowadays I believe it's 20 seconds. Okay, so my only interest here is in immobilizing someone for a short period of time, around 20 seconds, and holding them down and getting my win. So for example, it might make perfect sense for me to get a hold of my training partner's belt, post out here on the floor, put my opposite leg up, and pin my opponent down to the mat. When Bernardo goes to put me back in guard from here, he feels he's being controlled through his belt. I have a good wide base of support, my head is wedged down, and we can hold him there for 20 seconds. I didn't move, he didn't move, and we pinned him. 20 seconds, match is over, okay? So the idea was immobilization, okay? In the sport of jiu-jitsu, that doesn't make a lot of sense. First of all, it doesn't score you a dime. You don't get any points for holding someone in side control like so. And secondly, it's unrealistic to expect that I'm going to be able to hold someone my own size and my own skill level for minutes at a time. Yes, it's realistic to pin someone for 20 seconds. Sure, you can do that. It's not that hard. But to hold someone for 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes, that's not really going to happen. So really what we need to be able to do is to be able to transition around our opponent and use movement to hold someone down rather than immobilization. You can immobilize you can immobilize people for short periods of time, but you can't do it for minutes of time. Okay, jiu-jitsu matches are long matches. At black belt level, it's 10 minutes. Okay, in the gym, you might be rolling with someone for half an hour. So the key to holding someone down in jiu-jitsu is the ability to move around their body and deal with the various escape attempts through movement, rather than just holding on tight and trying to hold them down for a short period of time, in a matter of seconds. The 3 skills of dynamic pinning that I'm going to be teaching in this video, and which I think are going to be crucial for your development, can be stated very, very simply. The first skill is holding one pin. Remember, there are 5 pins in the sport of jiu-jitsu: side, north-south, knee on belly, mounted situation, and rear mount. Okay, so there's 5 pins. I should be able to hold any one of those pins for a period of time. I'm going to say knee on belly is unlikely, because that's more of a movement-oriented position, but the other pins, the other 4 pins, you should be able to hold for a period of time. But you won't be able to hold one position for a period of time. Rather, you must be able to flow between different variations of that position. Okay? So for example, to give a very simple example, let's look at north-south, okay? If I'm north-south here with my training partner, there's a standard, if we bring the camera this direction, but let's just move out this way a little bit. There's a standard north-south pin, okay? Where I go north-south with my training partner, he's got his arms in close, and we bring our body here and hold on to our training partner's belt and lock in like so. With my feet turned out and my ankles wide on my knees and my head pressed down, this is a very, very strong form of pin. My belt grip locks me to his hips and it prevents him from pushing me away. He wants extension here. If he pushes my chest away from his chest, that's when he can start bringing knees in and putting me back in guard. So that's always what he's looking for. But if I go on top of my training partner's forearms and lock in with the belt, elbows in close, and my feet pushing into my opponent like so, head down, when he goes to push into me, his own belt holds him in place. Okay? So this is one form of north-south pin. But realistically, if my opponent has skills, he's going to start taking those legs of his and swinging side to side and disrupting my balance. Okay, you can see what's happening. He's starting to create the space between my chest and his chest, and then in time he will get out. I might be able to hold him there 20, 30 seconds, but in time he's going to get out. Okay, if he has the same skills and size as I do. So we got to be able to switch to a variation of the north-south pin. Okay, so as I feel, for example, I started in one form of the pin, just like so. Okay, as I feel him starting to push out of here, I might go into a tripod pin, which puts more weight over my training partner's hips. Now when he tries to swing his hips up and put me back in guard, my head makes it very, very difficult for him. Okay? But even from here, he starts pushing with his arms and giving me a hard time. From here, it might be time for me to sit out. So I move to the side and I sit out to the side. Okay? Now it's harder for him to push me. Okay? I'm still locked onto his belt and in a good pinning position. And you can see what's happening here. I'm switching from one pin across to the other. Here, I've shifted to Bernardo's right-hand side. As he pushes and starts to turn to his right, I might walk around to the left-hand side and hunker back down and switch. So I'm moving from left-hand side to right-hand side. I'm switching from a tripod north-south back down to my knees. I'm switching to a sit-out position, back to my knees again. What I'm doing is I'm using a set of variations of a given pin. They're all north-south pins because my hips stayed above the shoulder line throughout the move. So I'm used different variations of one pin to hold the position over time. What I'm starting to do here is an important thing which I want you guys to start doing, which is to start thinking about your pins as a team. No one pin will ever hold someone down for extended periods of time, but a team of pins where one pin supplements another pin. As the weaknesses of one pin get exposed, I switch to another, and as the weaknesses of that pin get exposed, I switch to another still, and then I switch back to the original pin. If I can keep ahead of my opponent's defensive movements by switching from one variation to another over time, I can hold people for long periods of time, as opposed to 3 seconds or 20 seconds, and just holding on tight, hoping for dear life. Okay, so this idea of dynamically shifting from one variation of a pin to another is one of the first key skills of dynamic pinning. The second key skill of dynamic pinning is to go from one kind of pin to another kind of pin. In particular, from non-scoring pins into scoring pins. That's how you rack up the big points in this sport. So for example, if we have Bernardo here, cross side, if I'm across Bernardo's side, one of the most common forms of pin transition is a transition from side pin into the mounted pin. Okay, I can sit here all day and show you 1,000 different ways to do this. I'll be showing my favorite methods on this video. One of the more classical, well-known methods that you may know from your early days in Jiu-Jitsu is a step-over method, where I start with a given side pin on my training partner, and from here I hit a sit-out towards my training partner's legs. If we have the camera on this side, the big danger associated with sit-out positions is that I have very little base behind me, and if Bernardo explodes into me in a position like this with a big bridge, he can take me over backwards. Okay, so we need to be able to deal with this danger. The way we do this is by arranging our feet. I never want my feet dead on the floor on my shoelaces. Okay, now a simple bridge on Bernardo's part, and you see what happens. I get taken backwards. So what I want to do is come up to Bernardo's shoulder line. I want to dig my toes into the mat and take my hips off the floor and go chest down. I never want to be chest up to the ceiling. Anytime I'm chest up to the ceiling, a simple bridge on Bernardo's part will always take me backwards. Okay, so by pushing my hips off the floor and actively engaging my feet into the mat and turning chest down, I create a situation where his bridge becomes much less effective. Okay, now from here I want to step over. If we bring the camera in this direction, I never want to step over onto my knee. Okay, I never want my knee to come down first. It's very easy for Bernardo to time a bridge in this direction and roll me through. So what we want to do, having gotten that good position, chest down on the floor like so, I want to distract his legs with a simple slap that takes his legs out of alignment, just like so. And as I make that slap, my foot slaps the other side. Okay, now my foot hooks into my training partner's hips and I start driving my body weight forward down towards the mat. Second leg comes around the corner and lo and behold, we're in the mounted position. Now, let's talk about jiu-jitsu pins and time. When most people talk about times of pins in the sport of wrestling or the sport of judo, what they mean with time is how long do you hold the pin until the match is over. So in US collegiate wrestling, if you hold both shoulders down to the floor for 3 seconds, the match is over. I believe in international freestyle, it's instantaneous touch, 2 shoulders on the match, on the mat, and the match is over. In judo, currently, I believe it's 20 seconds for the pin. In jiu-jitsu, time becomes a factor only for scoring. If you hold the pin for 3 seconds, you get the score. If you don't demonstrate control for 3 seconds, no points scored. So, for example, if I'm here on top of Bernardo and I touch and go, I'm mounted, but if I don't hold for 3 seconds and Bernardo bridges and takes me back over, no points scored. I did get to the mount, but I did not demonstrate control for 3 seconds, and as a result, 0 points, okay? So it's not good enough just to get to the position. We have to get to the position and hold the position for 3 seconds minimum, okay? So with all that in mind, let's look at this standard method, the step over method of getting to the mounted position and dressing it up a little bit so it'll work better for you tomorrow when you step on the mats. Let's bring the camera this way. We start with a reverse crossface here on our training partner, okay? Bring the camera in, reverse crossface, I cover just like so, okay? Now, from here, I have my feet actively engaged with the mat. My rear foot is up here close to the shoulder line. If my feet are down here by the hip line, Bernardo bridges into me, I feel the full impact of his bridge. So I want my foot actively engaged in the mat here, my other foot up here by the hip line, and my chest down towards the floor. So my hips are off the mat, chest down to the floor. So it's hard for him to move me with a bridge. Now, if we bring the camera this way, I want to clear his legs, like so, and step right here where his buttocks meet the floor. So I just touch and go, and I step. Now, when he goes to bridge from this position, my knee is not on the mat. It's hard for him to get hip-to-hip contact, hard for him to bridge us over. I put a post in the direction of my movement and hook my foot around the corner. I close my mounted position, so my feet lock around my training partner's hips, and my spine starts to arch. When Bernardo goes to bridge, it feels like I'm very difficult to move. Now we wait out 3 seconds, 1, 2, 3, and now we're mounted and we're scored. You've just made one of the biggest scores in jiu-jitsu, 4 points, in a way that cost you very little in terms of physical effort. Simple step over, and you picked up 4 big points. So, our first skill is holding on to a given pin. We saw there were 5 pins in jiu-jitsu. The first skill of dynamic pinning is holding on to a single pin, using variations of the pin to flow from movement to movement and stay ahead of his defensive actions. Second big skill was the skill of going from one pin to another. That's how you score the big points in jiu-jitsu, these pin transitions. The third skill in dynamic pinning is extracting a foot, okay? Remember the fundamental rules of jiu-jitsu pinning. The fundamental rule is you gotta stay away from his legs. If he tangles you up with the legs, the pin is broken, it's gone, okay? So if I'm mounted on Bernardo, and for whatever reason, he gets a hold of my foot, the pin is broken, because now he has some kind of control over my leg, okay? And of course, it's never a good thing. If he gets a hold of the foot, he can always transfer to the knee, and before you know it, you're back in his guard, okay? So the second your opponent gets a hold of even so much as a foot, the pin is now broken. So the skill of extracting a foot is very, very important, okay? It's a very common thing whenever we're pinning someone, that at some point our opponent will successfully get through and capture one of our feet. It's a common thing, okay? Once they capture the foot, it's up to us to make sure we don't overreact and start panicking and then get caught up where our whole leg gets taken and we get put back in guard, okay? Let's understand that as long as my knee is free, we can always extract the foot quite easily. Once the foot comes into position like so, we can use any one of the half guard methods of extracting a foot to go right back into the pinning gag. And from there, back into a good scoring position, okay? So Bernardo goes in and captures a foot. I don't want to overreact here. I don't want to figure, oh, it's all lost, it's gone. He's got my foot, and then he puts the knee back in, and now you resign yourself to the fact being put back in guard and then have to pass the guard all over again. It's a nightmare. You want to minimize the damage, okay? He got a hold of your foot. It's not the end of the world, okay? We can still just extract our foot, get right back into our pinning game. So when he goes in here and catches my foot, we go in here and we use a method very similar to the ones we used in the half guard passing game to extract, and now we're right back in good position to resume our pinning game and go to work. So those are the 3 skills of dynamic pinning: how to hold a single pin, how to transition from one pin to another, and how to extract a foot if in the course of this game your foot gets caught, your pin gets broken, and how to resume once you've extracted the foot, go back into the first 2 skills.
Yeah. So John, makes a lot of sense now, like why, in my vision, why you put this dynamic pinning and the half guard passing in the same instruction, because
very closely related skills.
Yeah, most of the times that someone fails in the transition from pins, he's gonna fall in the half guard, right? And then that's the yeah. So guys, we just made an entire instruction all about half guard passing and dynamic pin with John, and where he explains like every single detail about how to pass the half guard and also how to transition from pin to pin. And if you fail in the transition, you're gonna fall in the half guard. So that's why we're having the same instruction, those 2 parts. So it came out really, really good, and that very soon it's going to be at IBJJFanatics.com. So maybe by the time you're watching, it's already there. So make sure to check that out. And
something that's exciting about this, Bernardo, is the skills that we look at in these videos really contribute to some of the biggest possible point scoring opportunities in the entire sport. Okay, let's think about this. Let's say Bernardo has me in his half guard. Okay, from here, Bernardo successfully sweeps me over from this position. He scores 2 points for the sweep. Okay, now Bernardo goes into a half guard passing sequence. He pushes my knee down to the floor, and from here, he's in a position now he can successfully pass. He chooses to pass directly into the mounted position. Beautiful. How many points did he just score? Well, he swept me, that was 2. Then he passed my guard, that's 3. And then he mounted, that's 4.
9 total.
That's a huge, huge score. In the space of a few seconds, he just scored 9 points. The chances of me recovering and catching up to 9 points is very, very small, okay? And you can see that all of those movements were relatively low energy expenditure movements. Most half guard sweeps are typically pretty low energy expenditure. Most half guard passes are typically pretty low energy expenditure. And the pin transition to the mount was very low energy expenditure. And you just racked up 9 points in a way which took very little time, cost very little energy, required no athleticism. And you see, Jiu-Jitsu is a sport that strongly rewards small, risk-free movement in big, big ways. It's the opposite of most grappling sports. Most grappling sports reward the big, risky moves, whereas Jiu-Jitsu tends to reward the smaller, more sedate, but very effective in a fight moves.
Yeah, and I think like most of our followers, they're like over 30, over 35, over 40.
This is a perfect
so this idea of spending less energy, I think
it's big for them.
Yeah. No, that was amazing. Oh, John, and one thing that I was thinking as well, like in the very beginning of the video, while you were explaining like how wrestling and judo, they don't get... you finish the match when you get the pin. And in Jiu-Jitsu, sometimes you don't even get rewarded for that. For example, the side control. Do you think there is any relationship as like Jiu-Jitsu is more related with self-defense than judo and wrestling is? So then they favor more the pin because to help it to go to submission. Yes. Why in judo? What do you think about that?
That's a fascinating question. I do think that there's elements of wrestling which are they address better than Jiu-Jitsu does for self-defense. The whole idea of clinching, taking people down, initial control right off the takedown. I think they do a better job than we do in the main. I think similar things can be said about judo. That they do a better job of standing position control, taking people down to the floor with force and projection. But Jiu-Jitsu's real strength is that idea of controlling people on the floor. And one thing I'll always say about Jiu-Jitsu, it has that unflinching focus upon the idea of what constitutes genuine control in a way that translates into a fight down on the floor.
Good.
And that system of working your way through a hierarchy of
Good.
pins, each one graded upon how much potential you have to hurt people in a fight, that's a very distinctive and a very powerful feature that strongly links the sport of Jiu-Jitsu with self-defense applications. And I've always been impressed by that.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So guys, again, it's going to be at IBJJFanatics.com soon. It's an entire structure all about half-guard passing and dynamic ping. So it came out really, really good. And make sure to check that out. Maybe by the time you're watching, it's already there. So thanks so much, John. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Please help me out to grow my YouTube channel. Just click subscribe. And to watch more videos, just click under see more videos. I hope you enjoyed.
BJJFanatics.com. Use the promo code YouTubeFaria to get 10% off any instructional video. Improve your jiu-jitsu faster.